Welcome to number one, getting started to TICAS Checklist. In this video, what we're going to go through is a couple of things just to get around using your CAS. So with your CAS with you right now, I want you on the first screen. We're going to start off by learning how to start a new document. So a new document, you can find that using your mouse pad over here. So your mouse pad has the arrows. You can click on them and move around. Now we want to go to new. New is for new document, and you can press the number 1 without using the arrows. So say I was all the way down here, I can actually press the number 1 and it automatically selects new. So if I'm going to press the number 1, selects new. So I'm in a new document now. Now in this new document, I've got all these kind of pages. I can add a calculator page, a graph page, a geometry page, a spreadsheet page, and I'm going to start off with a calculator page. Okay, so that we can start doing part number 2 here says perform calculations. Okay, just another note back at the main screen again. I'm just going to press this home button or on button. You see, this the scratch pad, don't use calculate and graph. I believe these have limited functions, especially for what we're going to do much later. So just make sure not to click there, but to actually add the calculator page down here, or when you're starting a new document, you can add a page itself. Okay. All right, let's go back, shall we? So I just press Control Escape for those who are wondering how I got back. So I'm back to my document again, and we're going to start off by performing some calculations, and we're going to start off by doing 2,619 right here. So I'm just going to highlight which problem I'm working with. We're going to do this, evaluate this. So here we go on my CAS. I am now going to type in 2,619 multiplication, which is right there. And notice that on the CAS, it's done with a dot. In an American system, they use dotted right in the center to say multiplication, because sometimes the multiplication symbol can be confused with the variable x. So here we go. We've got 2,619 times 427. Press enter, and you get a value. Okay, so pretty good. I'm just going to write down my answers here. So we've got 118313. Okay, next one. We've got to do the same thing, but 2,619 times 153. Now, since I'm here, I can type it again, but I also want to show you a couple of things while we're at it. You can actually highlight one of these problems and redo it. Sometimes you type things that are very long and you don't want to retype things, especially if it's only a small number to edit, right? So I can actually use my cursor. So you see the up down button, see how it highlights my entries. Now if I highlight the entry that I had entered previously and I press enter button, what it does is it copies what I had previously and it enters it back down. And the reason why I did that is just that instead of typing 2,619 again times 427, I can now just change this now by pressing delete 153 and press enter again. Okay, and so that gives me an answer of 400,707. All right. Now, similarly, notice that in the next line, it's also times 3. So again, I'm going to do the same thing again on my CAS. I'm going to press up on my cursor, press up again. I'm going to highlight, and I'm going to say times 3. So that I don't have to retype it. All I actually did was essentially copied, paste it down, or I used the previous result. Okay, so again, say if I didn't want, I could actually say, let's say I had that answer before. Okay, you can actually, without even copying it down, you can actually type times, so press times, and it'll automatically think or use the previous result, so times whatever the previous result is by 3, and you still get the same answer. Okay, but I'm showing you two things now. I'm showing you how to utilize the highlight button, so using previous result we've just done. Okay, copy and paste. You can actually also copy paste certain lines just like you normally would on a computer. So for example, on my CAS right here, I can actually bring this down. So let's say I bring this one down, and let's say I just want the 153, right? So with your shift button, so holding on your shift button, you can then use your cursor. Okay, so use your cursor, Shift button, and use a cursor, and it highlights exactly what you want. Now, how do I copy and then paste this? You can do Control and C. Control C is copy, exactly the same on a Windows keyboard. So Control C, I've copied it. And now what I can do, okay, I can actually, and I'm going to just do Control Delete to clear it. And then I can actually now do Control V, and it pastes the 153. Okay, so what I'm teaching you there is how to copy and paste. So Control C and Control V, and you can then copy and paste. Okay, now I'm just going to tick this off as my answer was, what was my answer? It was 1202121. Great. And then say with this one again, I'm going to use my previous answer. I'm just going to go back and I'm going to use my previous answer here, press enter, and then times 3. Okay, because it's pretty much exactly the same, but I'm timesing 3 again. So I'm just going to do that. And there you go. And if I want to times 3 again, I can use my previous answer, times 3. Times 3. And that just continues to multiply by 3. Okay, so you can use a previous answer. You can highlight one of your previous lines to get there as well. Okay, so I'm just going to write my answer here as 3606363. Now, sometimes what I also like doing is sometimes I like to delete a particular line so that I don't get confused. So say I didn't need this last line, you can actually get rid of it by pressing this menu button, but Control, then the menu, okay? That essentially does the menu button, okay? So what I want you to do here, so if you just put your mouse over here, and then you press the menu, Control menu button. So putting my mouse here, Control menu. Okay, you can then actually press delete. So number 4. And that just deletes that last line. Okay, and if you actually want to clear the entire thing, you can also do the same thing on this where your cursor is currently. Control menu again, and see number 1 says clear history. You can press 1 and it clears the entire page, just to keep your pages clean. Okay, that was just something I added on top since we're here. Now, in methods, and it will be different depending on which subjects you're doing, but we need to check our settings as well. So check or change our CAS settings. In methods, these are the settings I want you to have. So let's go document. So click on doc. We're going to go to settings, and that's number 7. And then number 2, document settings. And traditionally, it should be 6 to 12 on float, and that's just basically the number of digits that you are able to see. When you start doing year 12 methods, there are lots of digits, especially with probability, and you got to make sure that you're rounding correctly. So often I tell my students to work with float anywhere from 6 onwards. 8 is a safe number, but in my case, I'm just going to keep it as it is, where it is right now. So continue on. Now, angle, we work in radians. Okay, we work in radians for methods, so keep it in radians. What else is there? We've got normal good, real good, and now notice calculation mode. Most calculators by default is on auto. For methods, I want you to keep it in exact. If you're in further, keep it on approximate. Okay, or auto if you like. But exact allows you to change it to decimals if you wanted to, whereas if you're in approximate, if it's in decimals, it's hard to convert back to exact values. Okay, and that's about it. So we're going to press OK. So now we've checked off checking CAS settings. For those who aren't on a calculator page, how do you go to CAS settings again? If you press your home button, notice number 5, settings. You can also go to that from the start menu as well. Okay, so settings brings you to document settings, which is number 2, and then you can do the same things as we just did before. Okay, all right, let's go back. Control Escape, and we're back here again. Okay, now we are going to calculate trigonometric ratios. Okay, so we can do these. It says 43 divided by 7. So I'm just going to actually quickly do this before I do calculating trigonometric ratios. Divide 7. And notice when I press enter, I get 43 on 7 because remember my setting was on exact value. So the nice thing is you can change an exact value into a decimal point by simply pressing now Control Enter, and that changes it to decimal points. Now 3 decimal points would then bring me to 6.14, and rounding that to up by 1 because that's an 8. So the answer should now then be, was that 6.143? Okay, correcting to 3 decimal places. Then we're going to do the same thing with the next one. So 3.25 multiplied to 2.6. Notice it's already in exact value, so I didn't have to convert it. It is already now in exact value, 169 out of 20. Okay, now let's tick off this part over here, calculating trigonometric ratios. How do you do trigonometric ratios? Just right next to the 7, notice that there is this trig button here. So we press trig, and you've got your sine button here. So I'm just going to click on sine, and we want to do 30 degrees. Now notice there's that degree symbol. You can actually access that through this pi button, and notice on the bottom over here, you have the degree symbol. Okay, and that's how you get 30 degrees. Notice that because we have our settings in radians, okay, notice where my mouse is. It says rad up here. When it's in radians, it would think that you're doing sine of 30 radians and not 30 degrees. That's why we need to put the 30 degree symbol. So let's have a look here. Sine 30 degrees should give you half, and I'll press, and it is half. But if you didn't do that, if you did sine of 30, and note that your mode is in radians, watch what the answer becomes. Whoops, sorry. Control Enter, and that gives me a decimal value that is negative because that's in radians. But watch what happens if I move my mouse and you use your cursor. You can actually move your mouse up here and just click that. And what it does is it changes the mode to degrees, and watch what happens now that if I re-enter sine 30 again without the degree symbol, it is now half. Okay, so in methods, we will always use radians, so make sure this is in radians, but it just means that if you do any degree problems, then that needs to be in degree, has a degree symbol there. Okay? All right, we're moving pretty forward, almost towards the end now, so we know this is now equal to half. That's great. 230 minus 87, pretty straightforward. 237 minus is over here, 87. Get 150. How do you do powers? So 7 to the power. Okay, notice this hat over here. So next to the 4 and then next to the x squared is this hat symbol. And I can then do 7 to the power of 5. Okay, and that now gives me, so this is 150. And this gives me 16,807. And then how do you do root 637 as a simplified surd? And then to 2 decimal places? Well, surds, so notice up here in blue, that's square root there. The next one is nth root. Means you can try do 3rd root, 4th root, 5th root. But in our case, we know it's a square root. So I'm going to do control x squared. And I've got 637. Now, if I press enter, remember mine's in exact. The calculation mode we changed the settings at the start was in exact. So the answer will be simplified to 7 root 13 for me. So this is a simplified 7 root 13. And if I wanted the decimal version, you see I can now press control enter. Okay, control and enter. And that gives me 25.24 rounded to 2 decimal places. Okay, so you can see the benefit of having an exact value because you can always change it to approximate. But if you had it in approximate, it's hard to change it back to, or I don't know how to do that, to exact values. Okay, so that brings us to calculating powers and roots. Now that you've done all your calculations, there's a couple of things I do want to teach you here just to finish off. Saving a document, adding a page to a document, and add a problem to a document. So notice up here, it says doc. Okay, this is kind of like opening up a Word document, and if you're not saving it, when you close this, all your calculations disappear. You can actually save this as a document. It might be something that you might want to refer to later on. You can get very techie with it if you want, but essentially this is how you save. You go to doc, and it's like Word document, it's files, and you can go to save as, or you could have also done Control S. It would have done the same thing. So if I do number 4, save. And you can choose where you want to save this as well. You can create folders within your documents, okay? And I can call this anything. Now note, you don't have a keyboard like I do, so typing might be harder. You could call it test or T1, T01 if you want. Okay, I'm just going to type test checklist. Checklist #1. Easy for me to type, right? So I click save, and that now becomes checklist number 1. So that's how you save a document. It means I can start a new document, and I'm never worried that whatever I've done here, okay, whatever I've done here will always be on file. That's it. Okay. Now add a page to a document. So sometimes you want to do calculations, but you may want to graph something. So you can control document, because it says here add a page, so plus page. Control doc will bring you to this page, and it says, do you want to add another calculator, another graph, spreadsheet? So I'm going to go to graphs, and right now I can then type in another graph. So say 3 times x minus 1. I get a graph. How do I go back to my original page? Well, you can then do control left arrow, and you're back to this page, or control right, and you go back to the graph page. Okay. Now, the last part that I want to teach you, this is pretty cool. It's usually used when you're in an exam or you're in a SAC or something, and you're doing questions. Now, for those who haven't done this before, you may or may not understand what I'm trying to say, but I'm going to give you an example here. Say you do an exam and you get a question 1, right? It has f of x, which is your function, is equal to x squared plus 2x, right? I'm going to show you something that you may not have learned before. You may have. I'm going to go menu. You don't need to copy this. Define f of x is equal to x squared plus 2 times x. The reason why there's this next part where it says add a problem to a document is that question 1 might have questions just to do with sub. So part A might be 1a is the sub x equals 2. Then you can actually do this by doing f of 2, and you get 8, right? So 2 squared, which is 4, plus 2 times 2, which is 4. So 4 plus 4 is 8, right? Say question 2 now. Question 2 has a different function called g of x, and it is, say, the root of x plus 1, hypothetically. Then instead of having 2 functions, so instead of doing define f of x again, you'll overwrite what you originally had here. You can start a new problem still in this document. Instead of starting a new page and you have to start a new letter, you don't have to. You see, I can actually now do control, go to documents and insert. Notice here it says problem. Now the benefit of inserting this problem, so I'm going to add another calculator. Notice it's 2.1, so you can kind of think of this as question 1, and this is question 2, is that when I type f of 2 now, notice it won't do anything because the f function is unrelated. Question 2 and question 1 are unrelated. Whereas over here, if I type f of 3, notice it's bolded and it will calculate. So over here now, if I go back to problem number 2, I can actually then say define f of x equals to the square root of x plus 1, right? And now if I do f of 2, you see it's root 3, because I'm essentially saying if x was 2, 2 plus 1 is 3, then it's the square root of 3, right? You can see the difference here that this f of x does not get affected by question 1. So question 1 you can work on itself, and then you can do another problem, which is question 2, and all of this is still within the document of checklist number 1. Okay, so that was a bit to take in. Maybe you want to review what I just said before, but this one is quite useful when you're working with multiple problems, multiple functions, and you don't want to be using so many different letters each time you're solving a new problem. Okay, so that could be something useful for the future. Okay, so this is just getting started, number 1 checklist, and there'll be another video for this. Thank you for watching.